Hello, everybody. Welcome to DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. My name is Brandon Adams. It's great to have you with us. Fun conversation coming up with Jeff Sintel here in just a moment. And I don't know if you've sensed the same thing I have, but really the last couple of days getting ready for our program has felt like any other DawgNation Daily, where we've got things that we can't get to on one day, have to save for the next day. The NFL draft, I just think, has been such a great thing for our collective psyche, the sporting world. Really 3 good days of action. Some Georgia stories, I guess, maybe a little happier than others, but nonetheless, a lot to talk about there. And what that's ended up doing is pushing some things into the future that we otherwise would have already covered here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. So we'll do a lot of that with Jeff Sintel here coming up in just a moment. Let me also remind you that our program, as I said before, is brought to you by our friends at ESOG. And what they do, they're very famous for 2 things: foundation issues, waterproofing problems. And if you've ever dealt with one or the other, you know how significant that can be to deal with. The foundation of your home, that's the structural integrity. That's how it keeps standing. So if you're dealing with something like that, you want a smart person doing the work for you. And let's face it, water always finds a way. So if there's a way into your home for water will eventually find that. And goodness knows, there's almost nothing that's going to do more damage than a little bit of water can do if it's left unchecked. All the more reason to get in touch with my friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia. They have 2 full-time engineers on staff. They are proud partners of UGA, which means it's really fun to do business with them, and they're really easy to get in touch with. Dial 678-ESOG now. That's 678-ESOG now. And that'll get you in touch with my friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia. For simple fixes, they'll just give you a simple fix. But when it comes to foundation and waterproofing and stuff like that, sometimes it's more complicated. All the more reason to trust ESOG. As I said before, 2 full-time engineers on staff, proud partners of the University of Georgia, and great friends of ours here on DawgNation Daily. So it's really good to be able to have them as a part of what we're doing here. Really good to have all of you with us as well. And really good right now to be able to bring in Jeff Sintel. One of the things that we're going to talk about with Jeff, and I'll get more into this with the comments a little bit later on, something that Kirby Smart said going back to his time on the Paul Feinbaum show on Friday, making an allusion to what I thought was Clemson and Dabo Swinney, and or at least some program outside the SEC. Maybe talking about how those programs try to negatively recruit against Georgia, how those programs try to negatively recruit against other programs in the SEC. If you're watching on video, you'll see those quotes. You can read those for yourself today. That's what Kirby Smart said on the Paul Feinbaum show. Of course, podcast audience, you had a chance to hear this for yourself a little earlier. But Jeff Sintel, let me bring you in on this. First of all, thanks for being here. A lot of draft stuff I want to get into, but I do want to begin with this, going back to Friday. What did you make of Kirby acknowledging that, or maybe, some of the SEC programs recruiting against programs? I'm going to suggest this is Clemson. Kirby wasn't clear who he was talking about, but these programs that have a chance to sell, easier schedules, maybe easier opportunity to dominate, that somehow behind the scenes those programs might be trying to use that to their advantage when recruiting against Georgia, when recruiting against the SEC. What did you make of that?
Yeah, it's obviously a frustration point a little bit there with the Georgia staff. And anytime you see Kirby Smart voice even just a trickle of that, in my mind's eye, it means that there's a lot more he could say, but he's just going to give you that little top sliver of the icing of what's going on there. I mean, it's no secret, Brandon. You hear a lot of things on the trail. Georgia and Clemson have been going at it for years. They go after the same players. They're going to go after the same players in this case. Clemson has a lot of bells and whistles to tout in its program, and it's not a member of the SEC. It's, I think, a team that has only averaged about 1 loss per season over the last 5 or 6 seasons. And, to me, Brandon, that just makes me want to shake my head, because a lot of the elite prospects I'm around that I talk to, they're not looking for easy. They're looking for something that's going to be hard. They're looking for every practice day that's going to be hard, because that's going to make them better.
I want to be very honest with you about this. I think what Kirby Smart said on Friday is really smart, because my assumption is it is about Clemson, even though he doesn't say them by name. And I think Smart is also, pardon the phrase here, smart enough to know that people like me will take this to mean Clemson. He sort of has seen the way that people like me do our jobs for years. He knows how to throw some red meat into the water when it comes to something like that. But for Georgia, who, as you said before, is sort of fighting this battle right now solely in recruiting against Clemson, on the field, they'll play each other's schedule in 2021, and who knows if they may even play in this year's postseason. But on the field, they're scheduled for 2021. Prior to that, they're battling in recruiting all the time. I think anything that you can do to stigmatize Clemson is probably fair game, because let's face it, Clemson does have a lot it can sell for itself beyond just the fact that it plays an easier schedule. But we know the easy schedule is a little bit of a touchy subject for Dabo, because he has kind of been drawn off sides about that topic by the media many times. So if Kirby can poke that stick a little bit in the side, if Kirby can add the stigma of, well, Clemson's a good program, but my gosh, that schedule they're playing, soft competition. Are you really ready for the NFL if that's all you're playing each and every Saturday? I think anything that Kirby can do to stigmatize that is more fun for college football and the sort of emerging rivalry between these two programs. And also, it's just probably a little bit of a savvy move to kind of plant that seed in people's head of, oh, Clemson's the soft program that plays the soft schedule. The soft guys are the ones who ultimately go there.
Well, Ben, I think a lot of this, first of all, you don't need to be Carmen Sandiego to kind of figure out where the negative recruiting would be coming from. Who is a recruiting rival to Georgia right now? A true eye-to-eye rival that is not in the SEC. You got Ohio State. You got Clemson. Mm-hmm. You got to start stretching the imaginative. Maybe you got Oregon. As you go forward. This is funny, Brandon, because some of this I think about the college football season is like attrition. And if you're not going against great dudes week in and week out, you're not getting pummeled. Your body's not getting hammered down and whittled down. Let's face it, when everybody got to the SEC championship game in the SEC, all those Georgia LSU players were probably operating at 85, 90% because that's what a grind of Alabama, Auburn, Florida, LSU, you throw in Kentucky, you throw in South Carolina, you throw in Tennessee. That's what it does to a player. Sometimes I look at it from an NFL general manager's perspective, the same way I would look at high school guys, and I go, wow, Johnny Five-Star looks great here. Who are they playing? Is this guy any good? Is this a good program? Because everybody's going to have good tape against somebody that's going to be changing tires in 3 years. But like when you look at some, and no offense to the tire changers out there, sure appreciate you guys and the good work that you do. But when you see a guy that's sitting there and you're like, okay, how good is this guy on the other side of the ball? Is this a guy that's going to play on Sundays? Sometimes you have to wonder, even when you're evaluating from Saturday to Sunday and not just Friday to Saturday, you're kind of evaluating, now, can he do this against somebody really good? And I think, Brandon, the draft, you know how we say the film in the eye doesn't lie? Well, the NFL eye in the sky doesn't lie either. Because you look at the numbers, and I think, what was that, 64 from the SEC? I think it was 46 or 45 from the Big Ten. And then it was 27 draft picks from the ACC. And I think 10 of them came from Clemson. So you don't need to be a Johnny scientist to look at that data and figure out that one program is not being as battle tested on week to week as other programs are in the country.
Speaking of the NFL draft, I want to talk about that from a Georgia perspective for a moment, something that I think is really good, and then something I want to see some improvement from Georgia as we head into future years. Upcoming season may be most crucial on that. Let me start with the good. I've got a column up at DawgNation.com right now that I think you'll agree with. I think one of the interesting hallmarks of the Kirby Smart era thus far is the success that he's had with, less heralded recruits, 3-star guys who've gone on to be draft picks. There are a couple of those this year with Solomon Kinley and Tay Crowder. Solomon Kinley talked about that with us, his pride in being a 3-star recruit when he joined us on our Cover 4 video last Thursday. Obviously, the 2018 draft featured DeAndre Baker, and that may be the highest achievement of all of this because Baker's arguably the best defensive back in Georgia history as a guy that once told Jeremy Pruitt he had 0 offers when Georgia first extended scholarship offer to him. The 2021 draft may even have more of these 3-star type guys. If Jordan Davis decides to leave, Eric Stokes has the potential of being that. Justin Schaefer, if he earns a starting spot. Certainly Georgia offensive linemen have been drafted aplenty in recent years. When you look at one of the things that Kirby Smart has done really well through 4 years, I don't think this gets enough attention. As a player developer, Smart has developed some of the non-4 and 5-star guys and really turned them into some of the best players in the entire program. And that's before you even get to transfers and junior college guys and other names like that you could potentially add to the fold.
Yeah, you look at 2021, Brandon, And it's not just those 3 stars in the NFL draft picks. I look at the medium tier 4-star, the lower tier 4-star that becomes a monster in the Southeastern Conference. I think Azeez Ojulari is one of the brightest. When that guy gets to a combine setting or gets tested and scouts get to look at him and how fast and chiseled and smart and how really good he played. Folks got to remember, Adam Anderson was rated higher than him in that class. Brenton Cox was rated higher than him in that class. Robert Beal was rated higher than him a couple years ago. These guys are all stout, all-American types. And
good point.
Azeez Ojulari comes into Georgia on the heels of a crippling knee injury his senior year. Brennan, it was really clear from the jump. Once Azeez got the green light, and then what he did last year, he was clearly an upper echelon guy in the SEC already, especially for the Georgia. You're going to see a lot. You're going to see a lot more of that when you see a guy like Stokes. I always liked DeAndre Baker because he was a guy I thought that you don't see a lot of Georgia guys play both off man coverage and man coverage, and DeAndre Baker could do everything he wanted to. He's a guy. Even when I look at guys on Georgia's roster, I think a guy like DJ Daniel doesn't get enough praise and appreciation. That's another junior college guy that comes into Georgia. Mm-hmm. And listen, even the kind souls and sharp eyes on your program will sit there and say, Eric Stokes, yeah. Tyson Campbell, yeah. I'm telling you, folks, DJ Daniel, what he can do and how he's developed in Georgia, not just being fast and physical and pressing at the line, but being fluid and shadowing receivers. Those shorter guys, I'm talking about the guys like the Mecole Hardmans of the world, the Jermaine Burtons of the world, the Dominic Blaylocks, the Justin Jeffersons of the world. I mean, that's a player right there that's developed quite nicely in Georgia's system. And we start talking about the 2021 and draft and Bulldogs. I think DJ Daniel to me looks like a first or second round pick.
I want to talk more about that topic, what I want to see more of from Georgia here in a moment. Before that, let me remind you that, one of the ways that you can show pride in the University of Georgia right now, and I mean beyond the football team, is to step up and support the work being done by the UGA Alumni Association. This is the time of year we think about giving to the UGA Alumni Association anyway, and now those gifts made toward the university, the alma mater that you hold so dear, those gifts have never been more important than they are right now because they impact the university in a number of ways. First of all, let me talk to you about the Student Emergency Fund here for a moment. For a lot of Georgia students who find themselves not able to live on campus right now, they sort of step back into a home situation in a lot of ways can be uncertain, whether it be because of the loss of job for one of their parents or the loss of health for someone in their family. A lot of UGA students are in harm's way right now in a way that they haven't been before. This is true in any year at any time, but maybe even more so because of the COVID-19 situation. So the Student Emergency Fund you have a chance to support offers great help to those UGA students. In addition to that, your donation to the UGA Alumni Association also goes to support the research being done by UGA scientists as we seek a therapeutic or a vaccine for the coronavirus that's obviously in the news all the time now. UGA scientists are also in the news as well with some tremendous breakthroughs heading towards some really good news in our battle against coronavirus. But as you know, it takes money to support the work that researchers are doing, and that's what the UGA Alumni Association provides. Through the UGA Alumni Association, you also become a mentor as well, because for Georgia students about to graduate, they step into, as you know, a very uncertain job market right now. So by becoming a mentor, by using your expertise, your learned experience, you get a chance to instill that in the next generation of UGA graduates. What could be better than that? Also, so many of you are on your own front lines, battling in your own way against the coronavirus, and certainly the UGA Alumni Association would love to hear from you on that. So please let me give you a website to go to tell your story, to get involved in other people's stories, and really continue to ensure the University of Georgia is at the forefront of the work being done to make the world a better place in kind of a post-COVID-19 world. So here's the website. It's alumni.uga.edu/COVID-19. Let me read that again, and obviously, for those of you watching on video, you can see it on your screen. alumni.uga.edu/COVID-19. Support the work that the UGA Alumni Association is doing. Find out more at DawgNation.com on that as well. All right, Jeff, let me kind of keep the draft talk as it relates to Georgia going. And let me point this out about the reigning national champions, LSU. A lot has been said that LSU had 14 players selected in this year's draft, and that's true. They did. However, I think more significant than that is they had 10 selected in the first 3 rounds on either Thursday and Friday. Jeff, if you want to look at something, and this is not a perfect science because, it's not necessarily an apples-to-apples comparison, But if you really want Georgia to achieve at the highest possible level this upcoming season, as Michael Jordan said on the Last Dance documentary, there may not be any kind of I in team, but there is an I in win. Individual performances added together are what championships seem to be built on. I think that you need to see more top-end performances from Georgia in the draft. More development that turns a guy that's sort of drafted on a Saturday and put that guy to Friday. A guy that's drafted on a Friday, find a way to get him into that first round. I think if you're looking for Georgia to sort of break through that championship ceiling, this is one of those lagging indicators of the fact that was really happening. The guys who are draftable become Thursday, Friday picks, the way that LSU was able to produce that this year. If Georgia's going to win a championship, it'll be demonstrated, I believe, by the elite talent that sort of moves from the back end of the draft or the undrafted free agent ranks and sort of moves those guys towards earlier in the week on a Thursday or a Friday. For LSU, that turned out to be quite predictive, and I think the same thing will be true for Georgia if it's ready to break through this upcoming season.
Yeah, Brandon, that's a good topic. There's a lot of meat on that bone. I guess when we bring that up, a few things go through my mind's eye. I guess, number one, I think that you got to look at development and also, let's just say, hot sauce that Joe Brady and LSU's offense put on a lot of those guys. Frankly, I think a lot of folks forget that Joe Burrow threw for 16 touchdowns and 5 interceptions in his junior season. I think he threw for 54 or something astronomical, ginormous in his senior year at LSU. I think that enhanced the draft stock of Justin Jefferson. I think it enhanced the draft stock of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And I think the thing you got to look at with Georgia is they're having pockets of good stuff. You see the inside linebacker one year. You see the outside linebackers another year. You see the offensive linemen this year. Georgia does this, though, without wide receivers. You had one running back. You just don't get a smattering. I think one of the best stats out of that LSU 14 number that's being, bantered about right now was they had someone selected at every position, Brandon.
That's great stat.
That's a great stat. And, there's a debate here for somebody to make. And everybody wants to talk about, quote unquote, developing. You look at Georgia in the Kirby Smart era, and this is simply what the NFL guys are saying. The NFL has said Georgia has suited up a 4th-round quarterback and a 5th-round quarterback so far in the program. So for a lot of people wondering how much better did Jake Fromm get, how much did he develop from freshman to sophomore to junior year, you've got a Georgia offense, at least in the NFL's cold, calculating, sometimes unforgiving eye, that Georgia hasn't had a premier quarterback yet. A 5th-round talent, a 4th-round talent, and that's what Georgia has. It waits to be seen where Justin Fields will be drafted. But I'm sure there's somebody with a blog and a hot take and a chisel little clickbait type game to their reporting that wonders maybe Georgia's gotten as much as it could out of the quarterback position so far between the hedges and Athens.
So no one's talked about what he wants to see from the offense in the future more than I have. That's been a big issue. However, on the show anyway. However, on the subject of the draft stuff, I think there's something else that kind of quietly goes below the surface here, because while you want to see more dazzling performance from the offense, and I think you're right, Joe Brady at LSU, I believe, greatly enhanced the draft prospects of not just Joe Burrow, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire, other guys in that program. They benefited from being a part of the Brady offense, even though Edwards-Helaire's case, Brady was the passing game coordinator. The better passing game opened up a great opportunity for the running back, and his stats from one year to the next certainly proved that. But, Jeff, here's what's kind of quietly hidden below the surface for Georgia, which is the need to sort of improve the sort of top-end performance of your front seven guys. If you look at who are the defensive guys right now from Georgia to potentially be projected as first-round picks next year, I've seen the name Tyson Campbell come up. I believe Sporting News had him. I've seen the name Richard LeCount come up. I've seen him in a couple different places. Once again, you're kind of talking about those secondary guys being the best players in the Georgia defense, the same way that J.R. Reed kind of was a year ago as an All-American, or that DeAndre Baker was in 2018 as a Thorpe Award winner. But you really want to see that breakthrough occur with linebackers, more than just one Roquan Smith in 2017, but multiple linebackers kind of taking that step up towards being kind of a Thursday or a Friday pick. And certainly the defensive line drought for Georgia in terms of linemen getting drafted, that needs to end. No one's going to say that Georgia hasn't been a very good defense the last couple of years. The stats obviously bear that out. But to go from being very good to national champion means that I think you see these individual performances really, really pop. in terms of what your front seven, your linebacker, your defensive line does. That to me is almost as significant an issue as what still needs to happen with the Georgia offense.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to it's almost how sometimes we watch and like we wonder, I think the narrative hits the recruiting world first, Brandon, where folks wonder what's going on with the defensive linemen, what's going on with the elite defensive tackles. And remember, Georgia had a history of losing out on names like Rick Sandage. I go back to Aubrey Solomon. Marvin Wilson is another name that comes to mind. Well, when they don't get those elite guys in the 2016 and 2017 classes, remember, Brandon, that 2016 class had Julian Rochester, Mikhail Carter, Tyler Clark, a bunch of names that Georgia reeled in, and they were considered among the top 10, 15 players, 20 players in the country. And then they don't, and everybody wonders, where's the elite guys at the college level on Saturday? You mentioned Jordan Davis as a 3-star exception, but the last couple of classes, you've seen Jalen Carter, you've seen Trayvon Walker. Those are guys that you're going to see eventually on those high mock drafts and mock draft boards because they're coming in as the recruiting industry does a very good job. I think the numbers play out, Brandon, that dialing it all in, everybody's getting a lot better about figuring out who are the elite guys. The hit rate on a lot of those guys are a lot closer. I think the defensive line are where people look at in terms of what separates the SEC from everyone else. I just think, man, when you look at all this stuff going on, you got to wonder, and I'd be curious to get your response on this, Brandon. Georgia fans would love to celebrate winning the last game. They would love to tout that long-awaited national championship. But I think high school players, they're going to wonder about that national championship, and they're going to appreciate it because you can say you can get it done there. But I believe that number, like the LSU 14 and getting guys picked and getting guys drafted, or even seeing Andrew Thomas go number 4 overall. And I think Andrew Thomas, Brandon, is the highest selected lineman in the history of the University of Georgia football program right now.
Yeah.
You got to believe that sort of thing is going to go a long way with these young men. You got to look up Frankie Sinkwich, Charlie Trippi, Harry Edwards way back in the 40s and 50s, and then you got to go Matthew Stafford in 2009, and those are the only guys and Garrison Hurst in 1993. Those are the only guys ever in the history of the University of Georgia that have been picked higher than Andrew Thomas, and that's quite a feat, and that's quite an impressive statement to make. And I think a lot of these players and a lot of this talent, I'm kind of linking in my thoughts here that young guys, the best young guys want to go where they can be developed and make the league. And I know a lot of people say championships, and that's definitely important. But when you look at the big smiling faces on Isaiah Wilson and the big smiling faces on Andrew Thomas, I don't think a lot of those Andrew Thomas and Isaiah Wilsons of today are looking at those guys and seeing them in the moment and thinking about 2nd and 26 and never winning a national championship at Georgia. I think they're thinking mission accomplished, playing the game they love, making brotherhood relationships for the rest of their lives, and being able to set their family ahead for generations.
Yeah, but here's what I think the good thing, though, is, and for whatever reason, I can't tell you why this is true, but it seems to be true. Football is a sport, like, say, in comparison to basketball, which is different, where it does seem like team success is aligned with individual success even more. You mentioned Thomas and Wilson. They obviously accomplished their goal at Georgia, which was to get drafted in the first round, especially in Andrew Thomas's case. My gosh, he's got robber baron money after going number 4 overall. But the issue for Georgia was they didn't have enough of the guys like Thomas and Wilson who kind of worked their way to the first round to win a national championship. Compare this to, like, say, John Calipari at Kentucky or someone like that, where draft success and winning national championships, for whatever reason, don't seem to align quite as closely. In the world of college football, the programs that are producing the lion's share of the first-round picks seemingly are programs like Alabama and Ohio State, which hasn't won since 2014, I realize, but has won the playoff era. Clemson, now LSU. For the most part, a huge number of first-round picks has pretty well coincided with winning national championships.
Yeah, just being on great teams. But, Brendan, you go back to the point on the defensive line, and I'm trying to think as I was making my answer here. I can only think of Brendan, I think there's only, when you think about a true defensive tackle, I can only think of about 4 names. That's Kinlaw and Brown in the first round.
Yeah.
Those were the only 2 first-round defensive tackles. And I think it was Blacklock out of TCU And then I think it was Raekwon Davis out of Alabama. Brandon, out of those 64 picks, you only had 4 defensive tackles. So it's not like the whole world is hoarding those guys. And you look at a lot of those cases, Javon Kinlaw and Derek Brown, those guys, as far as their eligibility track goes, they could have been a guy that could have left for the previous draft in the 2019 draft. They were so highly sought and coveted. They just returned for their senior seasons. And I think that's what turned Derek Brown from a number 15, 18, 17, 14 pick into a top 10 and almost a top 5 pick. I mean, Brown.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
Brown. Brown is kind of the epitome. When you look at him, he was already good enough. And let's face it, everybody loves Jordan Davis, what he means. You know, Jordan Davis still wasn't a full-time starter for Georgia last year. And as good as Jordan Davis has been for Georgia, he hasn't been Derek Brown for Auburn at Georgia. And there's a clear difference between a guy like Derek Brown, even year 2, and what you saw out of Jordan Davis in year 2. And I think, you know, there are names in the 2021 class we could throw out here as well of guys that would kind of fit that mold. I believe that elite defensive tackle guy, Brandon, as much as folks want to say developed, I think you have to have a lot of the groceries coming in. See a Trayvon Walker, see a Jalen Carter. I think and Javon Kinlaw of South Carolina also comes to mind. Those guys have to be impressive once they get on campus, and then you got to elevate those guys from there.
Let me just finish with a recruiting thing. I want you to give me an overarching thing on Georgia because we haven't talked much recruiting. Also, how much fun did you have with the Florida staffer seemingly whining about Kamar Wilcoxon's pledge to Tennessee after at one point in time being a part of the Florida class? Jeff, for the people who don't know about this, so the Florida staffer, one of their player personnel guys or whatever you call that, has like the "Is this your final answer?" Regis Philbin tweet. Of course, on video, folks can see this for themselves. This is so unbecoming. This is so low rent. This is as Florida as it gets. If you're going to whine about decommitments, then college football at the SEC level is not for you. It's full contact. You're going to get your feelings hurt. And if that's the kind of thing that you're going to whine about, then you got to go play at a different league. You got to go play in a different league. You got to go play in a different sandbox because nobody around here is going to think twice about throwing elbows. So I think it's really funny on the Wilcoxon pledge to Tennessee. So I guess give me a thought about that, and then just give me a little bit of what's next for Georgia.
Well, first of all, Brandon, if we were in the T-shirt business, I think we could have get a bearded man yelling from that Robert Redford line, and the line underneath it would be, "This is as Florida as it gets." I liked that one. That was a new one for you. I don't know if Eddie Ghost wrote that one for you or not, but you know, Wilcoxon is an interesting story because he's from Georgia. I know the young man a little bit. I've been around him, and this guy, he's only a top 275 overall player, Brandon. You think all this consternation, let me use that word that my granddaddy used to say a lot, all this consternation about a 4-star safety DB hybrid who he has decommitted and committed to Florida twice. Obviously, that's not a very good look, but if you have to lose your grits a little bit about a prospect and wavering, and you got to look like that sly fox on social media. I don't think a prospect of this stature, if you're getting heated and you're busting that mind blown emoji over a player like this, that's just not a very good look, and it just doesn't bode well for how you get into the realm of the big boy recruiting with the elite players and everything else. So that's a good one, Brandon. That's as Florida as it gets. Little bit of recruiting momentum for Tennessee as of late as well. They get Wilcoxon. They get the 5-star out of Alabama, really taking him from the big boys, Alabama, LSU, others. A little bit of momentum for Pruitt at the moment. Yeah, well, man, I kind of saw this coming. When you look at who they've got there now with Jeremy Pruitt, they've got Niedermeyer, their tight ends coach, who is probably their ace recruiter. They've got Derek Ansley as well, Brandon, on the other side of the ball. They've got some hyped up black belt ninja recruiters of their own on that side. And, going to Alabama and get a 5-star pass rusher, you got to remember, Brandon, though, Tennessee's been doing this a little bit. When you look at Trey Smith, you look at Quavarius Crouch, they just re-recruited Cade Mays. I'm just going to let that one just move through the universe right there back to the campus. I mean, they've been able to get a 5-star here under Jeremy Pruitt's tenure. And that's a school that's going to be able to recruit. And I think, to me, it's fascinating, Brandon, because whoever's going to wind up as the second team in the SEC East in the next season, whether it's Tennessee, Florida, or South Carolina, That's going to be good for them. And how close they get to Georgia will be interesting. But those guys that don't wind up as the second dog in the SEC East, that seat's going to get a lot harder.
Hey, Jeff, good stuff from you. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia today. I know you've got Before the Hedges presented by Kroger coming up on Wednesday. Some more really good look backs to the draft at DawgNation.com. Looks ahead for recruiting as well. So we'll enjoy all that content from you, and we'll catch up with you here on DawgNation Daily, presented by ESOG very soon as well.
Hey, Brendan, I got one plug for everybody out there today. If you haven't, listen to this. I want you to join the DawgNation Forum. We're going to try and kick off a membership drive for new members of the forum. What better time to join the forum? And when you join the forum, folks, you got to have a mini essay. Now, I'm not talking about the Gettysburg Address or anything like that, but I'm talking about a really short paragraph about why you'd like to be a part of the DawgNation Forum. We're going to start it up soon. And the person that gives us the best stumping speech to why they would be a good member of the DawgNation Forum, we're going to get one of those coveted, elusive DawgNation swag boxes.
Wow!
I don't think we'll have Eddie the Blind Squirrel in there, but I think we'll have one of those DawgNation polos. We might have a hat or two. We might have some good stuff in there for you. So if you haven't joined the DawgNation Forum yet, be watching for our contest coming up, and we'll try to get you linked up with the DawgNation Forum message board.
That sounds great, Jeff. Thanks for being with us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger today. Presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. We will look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks, man. Have a good week, Brandon.
All right, good stuff there from Jeff Sintel. Time now for your comments here on D&D, presented by ESOG, our friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia. I'll do YouTube first, then we'll kind of pop over to Facebook after that. Scott Harris says Tennessee ends up second in the East this year. So I do think what happens below Florida in the SEC is going to be really interesting. And, listen, Florida, once again, is going to be aided by the transfer players that's kind of brought into the fold. What's his name? The Lorenzo Lingard, the running back, for instance. A lot to replace on defense. That's one of the things that I think you gloss over. The absence of, Henderson is Kair Lam ready to be kind of the focal point of that Florida secondary. The absence of Zuniga and Grenard, those guys off the front there for that Florida defense. Reese, the linebacker, gone now. A lot to replace defensively for Florida, and easy schedule for the Gators this year. But when you look at what's happening below them in the East, Tennessee obviously wants to maintain its momentum. I'm probably a little more down on Tennessee on the field this year than maybe I was a year ago, if that makes sense. I think expecting them to take the next step after what they did at the end of last season is probably harder than maybe people realize. I think there's some uncertainty right now at the quarterback position for the Vols that you've got to give some respect to. The team that I'm really interested in, and ultimately could make things difficult on Tennessee and maybe even on Florida there as well, after kind of giving up on South Carolina. Admittedly, we've all kind of got our predictions that we've made for years and years and years, and they just haven't really worked out. I've been kind of high on Muschamp at South Carolina for a while. I've always felt like that Muschamp was probably an underrated coach. And then getting Muschamp as a second-time SEC coach, the experience gained at Florida would be valuable for him in South Carolina. And the truth is that just never really came true. The same mistakes that he made at Florida, he was seemingly duplicating at South Carolina, in particular rehiring Kurt Roper, which obviously did not work out very well. He's just had a hard time getting any kind of offense going whatsoever. But we know that Muschamp's a good defensive recruiter. Gosh knows Georgia dealt with that face-to-face last year in Athens. I think if you're looking for big-time dramatic improvement from an SEC East team, I think South Carolina is the place that I would look. A team that won only 4 games a year ago, but a team that I could see winning 7 or 8 games this season. And if they do win 3 more games this year than they, won the season ago, you have to start wondering, well, where do those games come from? Now, one of them could come from a non-conference game because South Carolina lost to North Carolina a year ago. But getting someone in the SEC they weren't able to get this past season also seems pretty likely there as well. I think that Mike Bobo was a real coup hiring him as offensive coordinator. I think Ryan Helinski, when he's been healthy, has kind of shown you some flashes at the quarterback position. It could be a very interesting marriage, and Bobo could be enough to save Muschamp in Columbia because Muschamp probably begins the season on the hot seat as much as any coach in the SEC does. I think the Gamecocks are a very, very compelling team in the SEC East this year. So if you're looking for that team below where we think of Florida being, challenging the Gators, my look on that might be towards South Carolina. George Hernan says that Bobo is going to put the game chickens over the hump. I think it's a good hire. I do. And it's going to be easy to understand a lot of the reasons why maybe Bobo wasn't quite right for Georgia. And I think that Georgia on its own has made a pretty good hire. And I really like Bobo as an offensive coordinator. And this is not revisionist history for me. I was a defender of Bobo even back when he was getting some heat here at UGA. Now, good offensive coordinators have imperfect moments. What Bobo did at the goal line against South Carolina in 2014, not to sort of rehash old history, but that was not smart. And when you got Todd Gurley in that spot, you make Gurley the most important player on the field. And Bobo didn't do that. But you don't become a bad offensive coordinator simply because you had a bad moment, because no one's perfect. So even when Bobo was kind of getting some heat from Georgia fans at the end of his era here, which concluded in 2014, Bobo was always, I thought, a very impressive offensive coordinator because I thought the stats spoke for themselves, and I do think you'll see a pretty significant statistical improvement with his work at South Carolina as well. Stephen Venanzi on YouTube says Hot Rod in Indy will have most of his games indoors. It looks like a relatively good weather when he plays at Tennessee and Jacksonville could make for a good career for him. Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think it's also kind of good to be in a good organization. And I think of Indianapolis as being a good organization. Frank Reich seems like a really good coach. Indianapolis has a history of being run really well. The previous kicker, I know Adam Vinatieri's career is over now, but Vinatieri was a very good kicker for them for a very, very long time. You know, prior to that, arguably a Hall of Fame kicker with the New England Patriots. So when you follow in the footsteps of a guy that kicked for a long time, you feel pretty good. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but the kicker before Vinatieri in Indianapolis, wasn't that Mike Vanderjagt? And didn't he kick for a gazillion years too? So if you're Blankenship, I think you've got to feel about as good about that as you possibly can. A lot of these kickers end up bouncing around a good bit and sort of going from team to team. But if you're Blankenship looking to have a career, Indianapolis to me seems like a pretty good place to do that for the practical reasons that Stephen in the comment section mentioned, and also the fact that, you know, Indianapolis just seems like a pretty well-run organization all the way around. At least it does to me from afar. Let me get some Facebook comments here. Jacob O'Neill mentioning Jamie Newman. Boy, it's really exciting to see Jamie Newman, all the first-round projections he's getting for this upcoming season. Now, God goodness knows, those early mock drafts, especially a year out, are just incredibly wrong. Some of the ones that started coming out 2 months before the draft were crazy wrong. So, I mean, there's a lot of, you know, incorrect mock drafts that are out there, but seeing Jamie Newman getting some early love, I think that makes you pretty excited, makes you pretty happy. I think it does. Bruce Eklund, by the way, disagrees that Mike Bobo mishandled the situation, the goal line against South Carolina in 2014, which I guess people can have different opinions. Justin Sisk wants to know if the beer has me not the beer, excuse me. It's a very different motivator. The beard has me throwing the words down. I don't know. I hope that's a good thing. Hope that's a good thing. Let's get a few more Facebook comments here. Kind of see what's going on. Jay Kennedy kind of referencing the Jacob Eason quote that got some attention with what Jamie Newman's going to come in here and do at UGA. And, you know, listen, if Georgia wants to rewrite its narrative about quarterbacks, then Jamie Newman's the perfect opportunity to do that. Because if you want to say that Georgia should have gotten more out of Jake Fromm, and it probably should have, and Georgia should have had a different plan for Justin Fields, and one way or another, it probably should have, or it shouldn't have signed him at all. If you want to push that conversation into the rearview mirror and really sort of cast a new narrative going forward, take Jamie Newman, who right now, I think if he'd gone in this year's draft, the highest projection I saw for him was as a second rounder, and that was only really one guy saying that. Odds are he would have been drafted lower than that. Take him from a kind of fringe draft pick and sort of put him near the top of the draft, which Georgia has a chance to do with Newman this year. At that point in time, whatever has happened in the past with quarterbacks, that's all water under the bridge. And Georgia's completely rebooted what it is as a quarterback program going forward. Georgia has a chance to really, really recast that narrative by how Newman plays this year and how well Monken and Buster Faulkner, how well they develop Jamie Newman while he's at Georgia. Almost like for those of you that have flipped a house before or tried to flip a house before, that value add that gives you a chance to make it worth more money. Provide a value add for Jamie Newman, and at that point in time, you've completely recast yourself with quarterbacks, with Vandegrift set to come in, and who knows what happens with Gunnar Stockton beyond that. Really got a chance to do that. Matt Rugovinis says the Yahoo article may have been tough on Kirby, but it torched Coley. We had our hands tied last year. Yeah, and Matt, we talked a little bit about the Yahoo article yesterday, the one written by Pete Damel. And my point on this is sometimes as a fan, and I'm admittedly a Georgia fan, I want the best for Georgia. But getting the best for Georgia might mean sometimes tolerating some opinions that are not all that enjoyable. I mean, what Thamel wrote, as you said, completely, kind of going into last year's offense and by proxy sort of criticizing Kirby Smart for abiding that, that's not all that fun. But frankly, I don't think those of us who want Georgia to a national championship get closer to seeing that occur when Kirby Smart is treated like some sort of infallible genius. Now, I think that Kirby Smart is a very smart coach. And I think that Kirby Smart's success over the course of his first 4 years as a head coach, I think it speaks for itself. Georgia's obviously got national championship aspirations, but Smart's still a very young coach. And the development that he's shown, the success that he's enjoyed, I think you can probably put that up against just about the first 4 years of any coach. Not their first 4 years at a job, but their first 4 years of coaching. Smart has been quite a performer here in the early stages of his coaching career. No one can deny that. And yet at the same time, it is just a false narrative to treat Smart as if he's some sort of infallible genius and that everything he does is perfect and everything that he does is sort of part of his plan. There's an element in which he's kind of learning as he goes here. And hopefully some of the things that Thamel laid out in his Yahoo article, hopefully those are some of the things that Smart does learn to say, how can we be better in the future? And sometimes being better on offense might mean a little less of Kirby's influence on that offense. Todd Monken's a guy, I believe, based on his track record as a coach, deserves to have the trust to do what he wants to do. If it doesn't work, well, then I guess you got to figure out and do something different. But for now, what you don't hope happens is that we see a replication of sort of 2018, 2019, where Georgia had an offensive coordinator, but ultimately it's difficult to know how much of what the offense did was what the OC wanted to do, and how much of that was trying to live into a vision of football that Kirby Smart had in place over the Georgia program. You've seen the evolution occur for Nick Saban, and the results speak for themselves. You saw the evolution last year for Ed Orgeron, and really that's an evolution that even kind of predates Orgeron as head coach at LSU. A defensive-minded, run-the-football-oriented program that eventually said, this isn't working. We're going to hire the smartest guy we can find, and we're going to let him do his thing. And the results were obviously magical with Brady a year ago. I think statistically it'd be almost impossible to think that Todd Monken's going to match that at Georgia, but in terms of the freedom to operate and the good things that can happen because of that, from that standpoint, making the comparison to Brady's not out of bounds, I don't think. So the Yahoo article was tough. Not every Georgia fan loved it. Some were glad to be able to read it. I'm probably more in the camp of, even though I'm not always the biggest Thamel fan, in this case, I thought most of what he said about Georgia was fair, that Georgia would have won a national championship already if not for some offensive shortcomings. And more explosive plays from the offense in the future, I would say coupled with also some more disruptive plays from the defense near the line of scrimmage, you add those two sort of factors into the equation, Georgia's likely hoisting a national championship trophy here very soon. So I thought the Thamel article at Yahoo was interesting and not unfair. Good to see Steve Shafini checking in. Shelton, don't be doing all that negative stuff. Come on now. Don't be posting the same negative stuff over and over again. People don't like it when you do that. And I'm not picking on you, but don't do that. Matthew Furlong checking in from 96SC. Good to have you here, Matthew. I appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. Van West says that Smart's best trait is that he's going to make changes when needed. I hope so. This is a change that he's been hesitant to make, and I pointed out before, some of the things that Smart has said about the offense going into the upcoming season, very similar to what was said a year ago. Smart doesn't owe it to us to sort of show all his hands, his hand. He has every right to kind of keep his cards close to the vest if that's what he wants to do. That's his prerogative. But this is a change that I hope that Smart is willing to make, because I'm not quite so sure I've seen quite as much evolution as you've seen. I've just seen a guy whose vision has kind of come more into full focus. Smart in 2016 was probably pretty stubborn that year because he knew that he was building for a future year, being physical during practices, keeping the weight program going during the season. Those were new things for Georgia, and it was some growing pains associated with that. But it kind of all kind of came to pass as a better development for the team in 2017. However, what's happening here on offense is not a natural progression. What's happening here on offense is going to require a change in philosophy. And for anybody who's ever tried to quit smoking or lose weight or anything like that, change is hard even when you want to change. And it may also be true here that just because Smart wants to change doesn't mean that changing and letting go and letting someone else have control of that offense doesn't mean that's necessarily going to be the easiest thing to do. But obviously, it seems like Georgia's in a pretty good spot for that heading to the upcoming season. All right. Shelton Tucker says, "I just tell the truth." Even if it is the truth, don't keep saying the same thing over and over again. If it's truly the truth, posting it one time should be enough for it to stand on its own. Let's do a couple more things here. Michael Porter says, "What do you think about Hot Rod going to the Falcons?" So I guess a lot of folks, probably wish he would have. Certainly, it seems like Atlanta was coming to the market for a kicker. Ended up drafting, a punter. Was it from Syracuse? Is it where they took the guy from? I think some people were kind of disappointed about that. Let's get a couple more here on YouTube. We're going to get ready to go. We're in our RS Andrews cool down now, and it's been pretty warm lately. That means your air conditioning may be on. We're coming up on a time of year where it's going to be on every day, and if yours is not working, well, it's time to start thinking about getting that $99 Smiley tune-up from my friends at RS Andrews. They can get your system back to factory fresh specs. As I said before, it's a very reasonable price. You just got to find them online at rsandrews.com. We appreciate Dari and the whole team over there making this conversation possible every day. Our friends at RS Andrews do good work on your heating, your air conditioning, your plumbing, and your electrical systems. They'll take good care of you. They will deliver a smile for you. But you've got to find them online at rsandrews.com. A couple of more comments. Scott Harris says, "Who's going to do better next year? Kiffin, Leach, or Pittman?" The sort of three bottom-end SEC West coaches. I've gone on record as saying that I think that Sam Pittman makes a bowl at Arkansas before Leach or Kiffin make a bowl at their respective programs. I think that Sam Pittman's done a pretty good job managing that Arkansas program thus far. Made two very good coordinator hires. Nuts and bolts-wise, he's sort of building that program the right way. Now, they've got a long way to go from a talent standpoint. They were, on their way to having probably the worst recruiting class in SEC history before he was hired. And obviously, Chad Morris did no favors for Pittman with the lack of talent he acquired while on his way to getting fired there. So it's a long uphill climb for Pittman, but I think he's going about his business the right way. I do. Also, quietly, don't be surprised. This is going to sound funny coming from me. Felipe Franks is not a very good quarterback for Florida, which the results show you. But at Arkansas, where they're trying to win like 4 games, Felipe Franks is not a bad option for a program like Arkansas to find a way to steal a couple of wins for this upcoming year. Franks working with Kendall Briles could be pretty interesting. If you're looking for, a huge impact, you're not going to see that. But if you're a gambler, maybe looking for Arkansas sneaking up and keeping it close a couple of times or winning a game it's not supposed to win, maybe going over its projected over-under, which I think is only 3.5. I think Arkansas is pretty interesting from that regard. Franks is not a top-end quarterback, but he's not necessarily a bad option for one of the worst teams in the SEC to have. And so I think Felipe Franks working with Kendall Briles there may be pretty interesting. That may be pretty interesting. What else we got going on here? George Hernan says, "I hope we practice soon." So I really feel like that we've seen some very good news on the return to football front as of late. And not everybody really notices this, but it's happening. First of all, I predicted this last week. I think I said this on the podcast, and I think this is becoming true. The NFL draft was obviously going to be a smashing success. I'm not surprised at all by how well it's been received. I'm not surprised at all by how good the TV ratings were going to be for it. Roger Goodell clearly had a vision for this. It was always destined to be a success. And now that the success has taken place and everybody looks at it, Major League Baseball and others, now there's going to be a race to step in and fill the post-NFL draft void. Major League Baseball seems to have accelerated its process. Jeff Passan has written about this at ESPN.com. NHL, much the same way. The NBA is kind of dragging its feet a little bit, but, whatever. NASCAR is going to try to come back and have a race without fans very soon. The PGA Tour still seems on track for a return without fans in June. We are seeing some movement in the direction of professional sports. Now, more important than that, Couple other things to pay very close attention to. Very bold statement yesterday from Purdue University President Mitch Daniels, but the belief that Purdue is on its way to having students back on campus in the fall. Oregon had a very forceful statement, essentially saying that its expectation was to have students back in the fall. Other universities have said something similar, but these were quite forceful statements by obviously Power 5 universities, Oregon from the Pac-12 and Purdue from the Big Ten. Students coming back, first of all, I've always felt like students were going to be back because I just always have. But students coming back is a very important precursor to football in some form or fashion taking place during the fall. And it certainly seems like we're on our way to students coming back. Now, the universities themselves may not open until the summer. In some cases, some SEC schools, I think, are going to be closed through June or whatever. But that's fine. Students, though, on their way back to fall campuses, as Purdue has mentioned, as Oregon has mentioned, that's a very, very important precursor to college football. I've obviously been wrong before. I may be wrong on this. However, throughout this entire process, I've never been more certain than I am right now that football will be played this fall. The movement you see with professional sports, the movement you see with pretty big name universities in terms of bringing students back, that movement I think is very, 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 very important in the direction of getting us back towards football. You know, the statement made by the UConn president last week doesn't mean anything to me because it wasn't really based on anything. The Arizona president said something similar about not thinking there'd be fall sports. Once again, that wasn't really no evidence was cited on that. More specific is what you've heard from Daniels, from Purdue, and the Oregon guy about students coming back. It's a lot more specific in that regard. And once a few universities do it, I think more universities will follow because, let's face it, the colleges at a certain point need the money. And the return of those students, I think, opens the door for football to come back. Is that the way that things should be? Is that a smart decision? It's not my place to say. All I'm saying is I'm reading the tea leaves of a lot of movement. A lot of states are reopening, by the way. A lot of businesses in not just Georgia, which has been somewhat controversial. Colorado has reopened and has not gotten nearly the attention for whatever reason. Tennessee's on its way back to a partial reopening. You see some movement here, and it's going to continue over the course of the rest of the spring, heading into the summer. As of right now, I'm pretty confident we're having college football this fall. Rich Olenek says wishful thinking, and it may very well be. I'm just giving my opinion. Mike D says BA plays devil's advocate. Haven't seen it in a while. I'm not sure what I was playing devil's advocate towards, but sometimes the devil's advocate position can be one worth taking. Scott Harris has a funny joke about games without fans on YouTube. Let me do one or two more, then we got to get ready to go. Bama Boy, who's an Alabama fan, this is an interesting point. He says everybody in the SEC will have at least one loss. I don't see the dominant team. We've all lost too much. I would add to that, Bama, your team, my team, LSU, this uncertainty at quarterback is going to be a thing. A lot of programs not quite sure either what it's going to do at quarterback or what it has at quarterback. I think in Georgia's case, it doesn't know what it has in Jamie Newman, but it's pretty obvious Newman's going to be the starter. Your team, Alabama, may not know who it wants to start. Does it want to start Mack? Does it want to start the freshman? LSU may be sort of forced to start Miles Brennan, but it has no idea what it has in Brennan. That may be interesting, that sort of lack of quarterback certainty leading to a little bit of parity in the league. Obviously, because of the schedule that Florida plays, the one game Georgia can't lose is to Florida. If it wants to be in the SEC championship, that's the one game you can't lose. Jay Shipe says, this is an interesting question. He says, what if the Pac-12 doesn't play? Alabama will have a bye with USC. This is total speculation on my part, but based on some of what Greg Sankey has said as of late, and based on the growing divide that seems to be forming between some of these Power 5 leagues, I do think there's at least some chance that some college football is played, and in some cases, some universities just can't find a way to do that, or they're dragging their feet so much they can't do it. They'll end up being like the kid in a cast in the summer looking out the window, watching all of his friends splashing around in the pool. I could see a college football program somewhere dragging its feet, or a region of the country dragging its feet. I guess there's certain possibility that happens because different states have different attitudes right now. But ultimately, once some momentum moves towards reopening, it's going to be very hard for people to abstain from that. That's just, and once again, it's not me saying it's a good idea. I don't know what's a good idea. I've never pretended to be an expert on health or epidemics or anything like that. I don't know what's a good idea. I do know what the world will look like if there's no football, and it ain't pretty. I'm probably smart enough to say that. But in terms of what's a good idea, what's not, I won't pretend to know on that front. But I sort of understand human nature. And once a great deal of universities start saying they're going to have students in the fall, it's going to be hard for other big-time universities to kind of hold out on that because their enrollment's going to go down. The very practical reality that nobody talks about is, for a lot of these schools that want to be online only for the fall semester, kids are not going to, incoming freshmen may not want to be a part of that. They signed up for a brick and mortar experience, the prestige of being at a nice school. You don't get that taking a class on Zoom. So I think that's part of what impacts some of this. So once some start moving in that direction, I think a lot more may feel the pressure to do just that. Bill Kelly says that USC would be a buy anyway. Bill, I'll tell you this much. Now, Daniel's leaving. I don't know how this impacts that, but there's been some talk about USC maybe being a little bit better this year. Now, you can believe it if you want to, but there have been some talk about Jermaine King, by the way, says he works at UGA. He says, I'm terrified of students coming back right now. Yeah, these are complicated decisions. Jermaine, I don't know that I necessarily want to be in charge of making those decisions. I certainly understand that from sort of every direction. I get that. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. Joel Moody says, anybody got that extra quarantine 20 with some home cooking? Yeah, my wife's been doing some great cooking, and I have gained a ton of weight. It's part of the reason why I like the beard right now. It sort of keeps you from seeing how fat my face has gotten. So I definitely know where you're coming from on all that. I've also gone really late here. So I've got to get ready to wrap up. Let me do so by reminding you to make sure you check out our friends of the AJC for how things are going in terms of the state reopening, what that's been like. And you can follow all of that news. Sometimes we don't get into that part of it because it can be a little controversial. We're here to help you have some good times during hard times. We're not here to, sort of open up any more rifts, but it's important news to know if you want to stay up to date. AJC.com gives you a chance to do that. Get your Atlanta news now and coverage around the state at AJC.com on that. Also, the Daily e-paper is still right now open as an open house. Really good stuff. Continuing to look back on what's happened in the NFL draft. The local Fox Sports affiliate here in Atlanta is showing the 95 World Series right now every night. And so you can kind of follow in on all of that too with the Braves and kind of, looking back on some great moments in the Braves past. As I said before, playing more in the NFL draft. AJC.com, get your Atlanta news now. Let me also say this, 1,277 days, that's how long it's been since those lousy, stinking Gators have beaten the Georgia Bulldogs. It's our Gator Hater Updater here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Really appreciate ESOG making the show possible. Foundation issues, waterproofing issues, they do it all. They're proud partners of UGA. They're good friends of ours here at DawgNation Daily. So give them a call. Dial 678-ESOG now. That'll get you in touch with Engineered Solutions of Georgia. I'm running late. I got to go. Thanks for being here. DawgNation Daily, presented by ESOG. We'll see you back here again tomorrow.